Today, former Republican Special Counsel Robert Hur, who'd investigated President Biden for potentially mishandling classified documents, but ultimately chose not to charge him while also disparaging him in the final report, is testifying before the Republican-led House Judiciary Committee. And there have been many standout moments, but the best one so far, in my opinion, is the exchange between Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff and Hur, in which Hur's potential partisan motivations were utterly exposed to the American people. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, so this has been a long hearing so far. At the time of recording, they're in a brief recess, but Congresspeople are going to come back and ask Robert Hur additional questions. The standout moment for me so far has been between Schiff and Hur. And you may recall that Robert Hur, a Republican special counsel appointed by Attorney General Garland to investigate President Biden, ultimately chose not to prosecute the president. But what right-wingers, what Republicans, what the mainstream media ran with is gratuitous and sweeping characterizations of the president in Hur's final report about the president being a well-intentioned old man with memory issues. Robert Hur also says that the president has diminished faculties with respect to his memory. That's what people have been running with. And former DOJ officials, former prosecutors, not just liberal ones, but also conservative ones, conservative attorneys and prosecutors as well, said that Hur went way off base and was entirely gratuitous, especially concerning a person he did not intend to charge, right? So it was basically, a lot of us suspect that it was a way of having his cake and eat it too, that he didn't feel he could make the case against the president, but as a Republican wanted to throw the GOP a bone during the election year. So with that in mind, that informs this exchange between Congressman Schiff and Robert Hur. We're going to play the clips and unpack them together.
I want to refer back to your opening statement in which you said that you did not disparage the president in your report. But of course, you did disparage the president. You disparaged him in terms you had to know would have a maximal political impact. You understood your report would be public, right?
I understood, based on comments that the Attorney General had made, that he had committed to make as much of my report public as consistent with legal policy and legal requirements.
And you could have chosen just to comment on the president's particular recall vis-a-vis a document or a set of documents, but you decided to go further and make a generalized statement about his memory, didn't you?
Congressman, I could have written my report theoretically in a way that omitted references to the president's memory, but that would have been an incomplete and improper report, and that it did not reflect my analysis
and the explanation of my decision. You could have written your report with comments about his specific recollection as to documents or a set of documents, but you chose a general pejorative reference to the president. You understood when you made that decision, didn't you, Mr. Hur, that you would ignite a political firestorm with that language, didn't you?
Congressman, politics played no part whatsoever in my investigative steps.
But you understood nevertheless,
the words
didn't you,
that I put in my report.
Mr. Hur, you cannot tell me you're so naive as to think your words would not have created a political firestorm. You understood that, didn't you, when you wrote those words, when you decided to include those words, when you decided to go beyond specific references to documents? You understood how they would be manipulated by my colleagues here on the GOP side of the aisle and by President Trump. You understood that, did you not?
Congressman, what I understood is the regulations that govern my conduct as special counsel.
And those regulations
required me to write a confidential report for the Attorney General,
which you knew would not be confidential.
My decision, and that is what I did, Congressman. I followed the rules.
You knew it would not be confidential.
I followed them.
You knew it would not be confidential, didn't you?
Sir, the regulations required me to write a confidential report explaining my decision to the Attorney General.
Which you knew would be released.
It was up to the Attorney General to determine
you understood it would be released, did you not?
Would be released consistent with DOJ policy.
You understood it would be released. In the rules, Mr. Hur, what is in the rules is you don't gratuitously do things to prejudice the subject of an investigation when you're declining to prosecute. You don't gratuitously add language that you know will be useful in a political campaign. You were not born yesterday. You understood exactly what you were doing. It was a choice. You certainly didn't have to include that language. You could have said, vis-a-vis the documents that were found at the university, the president did not recall. There is nothing more common. You know this, I know this. There is nothing more common with a witness of any age when asked about events that are years old to say, I do not recall. Indeed, they're instructed by their attorney to do that if they have any question about it. You understood that. You made a choice That was a political choice. It was the wrong choice. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
So wish to respond to that final question?
Yes, Congressman, what you are suggesting is that I shape, sanitize, omit portions of my reasoning and explanation to the Attorney General for political reasons.
No, I suggest that you not shape your report for political reasons, which is what you did.
That did not happen.
So that right there, that was a lengthy exchange. You can tell that Hur got defensive. And then there at the end, he took the opportunity to say, listen, you wanted me to make this report political. You wanted me to take political considerations. And Adam Schiff is actually saying, no, the opposite. You should not have taken political considerations when you were writing the report, and your language was gratuitous and unnecessary. And here's the thing. Schiff was generous. Schiff said, listen, if memory issues, such as they were a factor, which they were only a factor in Hur's decision not to prosecute the president, Schiff didn't say or demand that you omit those. He's like, no. If that was a factor, fine, fair enough, and report it. But report specifics. With respect to this specific document or this specific instance, the president, could not recall specific events or whatever such that a jury may not have found him guilty or may have found reasonable doubt to doubt his guilt. That would have been appropriate. Instead, you make sweeping generalizations about a well-meaning elderly man with memory issues and diminished faculties. So again, I think Schiff made an enormously compelling case, and also her denying, I didn't know that there would be political consequences to this. Again, Schiff is making the case that even if you didn't intend it, which we have no reason to believe, but let's say you didn't intend for there to be political consequences, you had to have known that there would be political consequences as a result of the language you used in the report. But Hur didn't even address that, just completely sidestep the issue while acting defensive. But I want to remind people, again, that multiple legal professionals, including the former general counsel for the Justice Department, Andrew Weissman, say that Hur's language was completely inappropriate.
So I have very strong views on that based on the model that James Comey set, where somebody there, Hillary Clinton, was not being charged. Sounds familiar. Yep. This is not being charged. And yet a person goes out and gives their opinion with adjectives and adverbs about what they think. Entirely inappropriate. That is not the role of the Department of Justice. I don't even understand why you would engage in, just as a prosecutorial matter, your memory today is irrelevant. Whether I find you in an interview to have forgotten things, certainly to say, what do you remember about certain documents in your house, 4 or 5 years ago, I would understand that you might not remember that. To talk about your memory today, irrelevant. It is gratuitous. And it is also exactly what you're not supposed to do, which is putting your thumb on the scale that could have political repercussions. Your decision is essentially, to the vernacular in the Department of Justice, is put up or shut up.
Well said. Okay. And Hur, again, attempted to have his cake and eat it too. But again, it's also conservative attorneys and legendary attorneys like Alan Dershowitz. This is what he had to say.
Hur was also wrong in going as far as he went in trying to do a medical diagnosis of somebody who he hadn't examined, who medically or hadn't been examined medically. So, I think this report is going to really cause us to think hard about the role of special counsel.
Alan Dershowitz, a longtime defender of Donald Trump, certainly no, bleeding heart liberal. J. Michael Luttig, a legendary federal conservative judge.
In particular, there's, I guess, considerable discussion in this 315-page report, which, again, in my view, is an abuse of power, pure and simple. And but he goes on at length about the incumbent president's mental capacity in whatever contexts, all toward the end of concluding that Joe Biden should not be prosecuted. That's about as unseemly and an abuse of power
Again, not a bleeding heart liberal, a lifelong conservative, legendary federal judge. Ian Sams, President Biden's spokesperson with respect to Congress, he summarized it very well.
This actually a minute ago, and I think, when you have the former attorney general, when you have the former acting FBI director, when you have the former general counsel of the FBI, these are experienced people at the Justice Department who spent decades working at the Justice Department. And they're saying it's gratuitous. They're saying that this is inappropriate, that this is inconsistent with DOJ policy and practice. That's them saying it. We agree.
So there you have it, folks. Again, I think this exchange between Schiff and Hur, at least so far, has been the definitive one, where, again, it seems very obvious that what Hur tried to do is have his cake and eat it too. Listen, I can't make the case against Biden in a court of law when, the standards are at a criminal level. There's a jury that I have to satisfy beyond all reasonable doubt. But also, he's a lifelong Republican in an election year. And so, as these prosecutors say, I mean, it's just gratuitous, inappropriate language, inconsistent with DOJ policies. And there was a way, as Schiff points out, to have to report if you felt that Biden's memory lapses were such that it was a factor in your decision not to prosecute. But again, Hur wildly overstepped and made sweeping generalizations, which he had to have known would have enormous political implications. Again, wildly inappropriate. So I think that it was very instructive, and I think it exposed Hur's partisan inclinations to the American people. Let me know what you think in the comments.